Hey all, here OS Reviews. In this video, we're taking a quick look at the Xgoody Gimbal 5. And this is a brand perhaps best known for making budget phones and tablets in the past, but looks like they're also branching out into projectors now. This one going for roughly $100 also runs on Android. It has built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, so you can supposedly stream back YouTube, Netflix, and other TV shows directly on the projector, even without connecting to your phone or computer. Although it still has a traditional HDMI port, it has a Full HD 1080p native resolution that should be a little bit sharper compared to 720p native res found on budget projectors in the past, and also claims to have a auto keystone correction function, so using built-in gravity sensors or accelerometers, the corners are going to be relatively straight even as you're tilting it onto a wall. It's called the Gimbal 5 because of a stand that is built in. If you wanted to project the image directly onto the ceiling versus a wall, for instance, you can flexibly rotate the hinge. Built-in Wi-Fi also supports Miracast, so you can wirelessly send the screen from your phone over to the projector as well, and it's relatively small and compact, although not quite as tiny as on some Pico DLP projectors, although those will also be a bit more expensive, particularly if you're getting a 1080p resolution unit. Bluetooth 5.0 also allows you to connect to wireless headphones or speakers. Last but not least, I'll mention they have another model called the Gimbal 3. The shell is round, and this white color might be a little cleaner looking, perhaps slightly resembling a model from Samsung. However, the Gimbal 3 does have a 720p native resolution, so it's not going to be quite as sharp as the Gimbal 5, which is again 1080p native res. Otherwise, in the box, we have just the projector itself. We'll take a closer look at in a moment. You also get a bundled HDMI full-size cable, a nice goodie, also the power supply, which is using this kind of barrel plug connection as opposed to something like Type-C, which would have been maybe a little more convenient, but it is what it is. You also get just a quick user guide plus a remote control that takes two AAA batteries. And the projector itself is crafted out of plastic, but it doesn't feel too hollow. Here's a quick size comparison next to kind of an average size phone, roughly 6.5 inches. Here's also a standard size soda can next to it, so you get a better idea. It is going to be not as large as some home theater projectors, so not really pocket sized, but still relatively compact. Again, the lens here on the front you can also twist on to change the focus, which is still done manually on this model. Again, it has auto keystone correction for adjusting the tilt, but not the focus level, so depending on how far away you are from the wall or ceiling, you can use this to ensure the image stays sharp. Some of the specs are labeled here, and then on the very back are going to be all of the I/O, inclusive of the full-sized HDMI, 3.5mm headphone jack if you don't want to use Bluetooth or the built-in speakers, and also a USB Type-A, so if you have any files loaded onto a thumb drive, it can load it back directly, and there's also going to be a power key and some ventilation fans. So overall, a pretty simple presentation. The stand, by the way, does have a very generous soft touch rubber padding at the bottom here, so it sticks quite firmly onto flat surfaces and holds the weight of the projector in pretty much every single position. Maybe the only slight downside, though, is the hinge does feel a bit violent in the sense that when you are twisting it, it makes a pretty loud mechanical sound. And it's even more obvious if you are putting it onto a table. You can hear how the noise there might be a little bit higher in terms of the vibrations. But I guess the most important part is it does support the weight of the projector without tipping over. With pretty flexible angles, it locks into place when you are adjusting it. Here's also what the fan sounds like. So it's not the most quiet, particularly if compared with smaller Pico projectors, but at least it provides adequate ventilation, preventing any overheating during extended use, and isn't quite as bad when you actually start watching back a movie as sound and music kicks in. And here are some file formats that it recognizes, including local videos up to 4K at 30 FPS. If you have it loaded onto, again, a thumb drive, it can read it back directly. Even though, again, the output resolution will technically be still 1080p. And the speaker here is going to be a single driver at 3 watts for the built-in sound. Finally, a quick peek here at the remote. Pretty standard with a 4-way navigation toggle. You also have a mouse key if you don't want to use the 4-way D-pad, in addition to a kind of Miracast button, power, mute, and also standard Android controls for going home, menu, and back, plus volume. Like most budget projectors, however, it's not a backlit remote, which might have been a little helpful when you are in darker environments. Now, one thing I will say is because of the Android operating system, boot up does take a little longer compared to a non-smart projector, in this instance around a minute or so before we enter the main UI. And this, by the way, is not a projector that has a built-in battery, so keep that in mind. You have to be plugged into the AC outlet at all times to use it, unless you have a larger power bank available. So it really is designed to be used primarily at home, in the bedroom, for instance, in a dorm, somewhere where you might be a little bit more tight on space and you have just the wall or ceiling, and have the screen disappear when it's not in use. So helpful when space is more limited. I would say the minimum virtual screen size is around 40 inches, but you can get it as large as 150 to 200 inches. However, the larger that you go, the lower the PPI, because you are then stretching the pixels across a larger surface, but still looks decent at around 100 to 120 inches, I would say might be an optimal sweet spot. Because this model has built-in Wi-Fi, you can also expect some occasional firmware updates to improve on the system stability, and also in terms of brightness, I would say you would mostly want to use this one in darker environments. Again, if there's a bit of ambient light around you, the picture quality will slightly degrade. So like most projectors, darker environments is when the colors and contrast will pop the most. Otherwise, it's pretty easy to adjust the focus just by using, again, the wheel on the front, and it does indeed have the aforementioned tilt correction functionality, auto keystone, so as we are rotating it across different angles, it always tries to keep the image flat, as you can tell there. And zooming in a little bit closer, I would say overall quality and detail, sharpness, resolution of the projector isn't bad. At the very least though, it looks like the edges are still relatively sharp and presenting a uniform enough image when it comes to casual entertainment. Now, built-in Wi-Fi here is dual band, including support for Wi-Fi 6. Antenna reception quality was generally pretty strong, and as you can tell, the UI here is quite simple to operate. We have just these grids. For jumping into some of your main apps, using the 4-way D-pad, it's relatively responsive. It is an IR remote though, so it needs to be within direct line of sight with the projector for it to function. You can also jump into all apps, and by default, you can tell there's a couple of other utility tools on here, such as the aforementioned Americast. Also nice to see Google Play Store is pre-installed, so you can download more apps, just like on a regular phone or tablet, and some other streaming apps, including Disney+, Netflix, are also pre-installed. You can also remove them if not being used. Standards from Android, including a calculator, Chrome for web browsing, and also AirPlay, which is the equivalent of Americast for iOS devices, iPhones, and iPads, can also be found, plus just a file manager. So it is keeping things relatively simple and straightforward. You can also jump into more advanced settings from here, allowing you to connect to other Wi-Fi or Bluetooth devices. And under projection settings, you can also access a virtual screen zoom. So by default, it's at 100%, but let's say I want to crop in the image without moving the projector closer or further from the wall, so you can actually make it digitally smaller, as you can tell there. Could also be useful if you're trying to fill a specific spot inside of a wall or projection screen. And under projection mode, you can also manually flip the orientation. So if you are trying to pop this onto a ceiling, for instance, you can still use it. You can also turn the auto keystone function on and off and recalibrate the sensors if needed. So it is pretty basic, but allows you to control those essentials. We can see that technically there's 8 gigabytes of built-in storage, and half of that is occupied by the OS and built-in apps. So it's definitely not going to be a speed demon or flagship level specs compared to smartphones. But keep in mind that on a Android TV box or similarly entry-level Chromecast or Fire TV stick, you're not getting radically different hardware either. It mostly gets by with doing the basics when it comes to video streaming, light web browsing, things like that. It can still get by all right, maybe just giving it a beat longer sometimes to load and react. But again, not too far off from a Chromecast or Fire TV stick in this regard. Here's also what the built-in file manager looks like. Let's jump into the YouTube app and take a quick look at how it handles streaming back video directly. We can sign in with a Google account similar to on a Chromecast. It is the Android TV interface, a little bit easier to navigate with the remote. But one feature that is missing here would be a built-in microphone, so you can't really use voice input, which might have been more convenient. On here, you may have to hunt and peck a little bit, or you can connect to Bluetooth and use an external remote or keyboard of your choice instead. So let's do a quick demo here. Loading speeds don't seem to be that bad. Good enough antenna reception quality. You don't have to be waiting too long for the videos to buffer, thankfully. We're skipping ahead into another part of the video here, taking just a split second, and then it just resumes. So not bad in terms of general responsiveness, similar to other Android TV or Google TV interfaces that we've seen in the past. So we can also try toggling into the mouse mode just to serve as a demo. You'll have a virtual cursor point that you can instead navigate using the 4-way toggle. It doesn't have any gesture or accelerometers built into the remote though, so you still have to press the keys. That might be useful if you're trying to press on a smaller link when you are web browsing. And the shortcuts at the very top for instantly jumping into AirPlay as well as Americast for iOS and Android are also not bad. Here on a Samsung Galaxy device, opening up Smart View or screencasting, you can find the projector and just tapping on it. As long as both devices are connected to the same Wi-Fi network, we'll be able to start casting our screen over after just a split second. So working well enough. There will be, of course, a little bit of latency compared to a wired connection, but it's not too problematic if you're just streaming back video, showing a photo or document onto the larger screen. And here's a quick example of a web article. We can also rotate the screen on our phone to get a slightly larger view on the projector as well. It is still mostly legible, so if you wanted to show some documents, it might be an okay experience compared to a native 720p projector or 480p would have looked a lot more fuzzy, but general images and videos probably still look the best. And here's also one example of trying to do a bit of gaming, again casting it over onto the larger display, maybe for friends and family to also watch along with. Not too problematic, you have the convenience of a wireless connection. Last but not least, jumping into a quick demo of the HDMI connection mode. This is probably going to be the best one if you want the lowest latency. And so connecting a Windows computer in this demo and also playing back some audio as well. This is what the built-in speakers sound like. Alright, so turning things down, the audio volume level is not bad, but doesn't have quite as much richness or bass as on larger speaker units. For a built-in one, it's okay, but obviously you can improve on the experience using your own headphones or speakers as desired. Overall image quality, though, is really not shabby, I would say, in terms of giving you an immersive enough experience. Colors aren't that bad either when it comes to general vibrancy. Larger text details, again, are still legible enough as you are navigating around and still feels enjoyable enough. And again, there's nothing stopping you from playing back some games on your computer or hooking up an Xbox, PlayStation, or retro handheld and getting just a little bit of a more immersive experience. Good for relaxing, kind of kicking back on a sofa or popping it onto the ceiling if you're in bed, getting some casual entertainment in before you drift off into sleep. So that is more or less it as far as our hands-on review of the XGoody Gimbal 5. Even though it isn't the most flagship-grade projector out there, and far from maybe being the best when it comes to having the most advanced functionality, but for around $100, I wouldn't say it's shabby for just a basic unit, providing a nice expectation of what you can expect here in 2024. And for just general video consumption, streaming, I would say the resolution has definitely improved compared to past models in this price range. And I also like the flexibility of the rotatable hinge for, again, positioning onto a wall or onto a ceiling. So as long as you don't have unreasonable expectations, I would say it's fair enough as an entry-level projector. Not bad, all things considered. You can learn more details if you are interested in the links down below, but for now that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been the XGoody Gimbal 5.